When I arrived at my little sister's wedding after flying nearly 14 hours from Seattle, my own mother stopped me at the entrance. She smiled at the guests, looked straight into my eyes, and quietly said, "Please don't tell anyone you're our daughter." I thought nothing could hurt more than hearing those words. I was wrong, because 3 days later, the same parents who pretended I didn't exist sent me a bill for $41,000 and expected me to pay it. People always say, family comes first. I believed that for 32 years. I believed it every time I canceled vacations to send money home. Every birthday I missed because I was working overtime. Every holiday I spent alone so my parents wouldn't have to worry about another expense. I believed that love meant sacrifice, until I realized I was always the one sacrificing. Welcome back to Betrayal Stories. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. My name is Claire Bennett. I grew up in a quiet coastal town in Oregon called Harbor Point. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, where people waved from their porches, where rumors traveled faster than the ocean wind. My father owned a small repair shop. My mother worked part-time at the public library. Money was always tight, so when I turned 16, I started working after school. At first it was just a few evenings each week at the grocery store. By senior year, I was working almost 30 hours while keeping my grades up. Not because anyone forced me, because I genuinely wanted to help. Whenever my paycheck came in, half of it quietly found its way onto the kitchen counter. Mom never asked. Dad never thanked me. It simply became expected. 5 years later, I earned a scholarship to the University of Washington. Leaving Harbor Point should have felt exciting. Instead, it felt like guilt. Mom cried for weeks. Not because she'd miss me, because she worried who would help with the bills. I promised I'd send money whenever I could. And I did. Every single month. Sometimes it meant eating instant noodles for 2 weeks. Sometimes it meant skipping weekends with friends. Sometimes it meant working 2 jobs while studying full-time. I never complained, because that's what daughters do. At least, that's what I believed. After graduation, I landed a software engineering job in Seattle. The salary was better than anything I'd imagined. For the first time, I could finally breathe financially. Or so I thought. Instead, the requests became bigger. Dad needed a new truck. The roof started leaking. Medical bills appeared. The repair shop needed equipment. There was always another emergency. I never asked questions. I simply transferred the money. Looking back, I wasn't helping anymore. I had become the family's emergency fund. The only person who never asked me for anything was my younger sister, Lily. She was 6 years younger than me. Bright, funny, kind. We talked almost every Sunday. She always asked about my life, my apartment, my job. Unlike everyone else, she actually cared about the answers. When she got engaged to Nathan, I cried. Not because she was getting married, because she sounded genuinely happy. She deserved that. About 9 months before the wedding, Mom called. "We found the perfect venue." "That's wonderful. It's expensive." I smiled. I figured there'd be a but. She laughed. "You know us too well." The venue required a larger deposit than expected. Without even thinking, I covered it. Mom thanked me. Dad sent a short text. "Appreciate it." That was all. Over the next several months, the wedding budget somehow kept growing. The photographer upgraded his package. The florist raised prices. The caterer needed another payment. Each time, Mom sounded stressed. Each time, I helped. Not because anyone demanded it, because I wanted Lily's day to be perfect. One evening, Lily called. "You've done enough." "What do you mean?" "I know Mom keeps asking." "It's okay." "No, it isn't." She hesitated. "I don't want you thinking I expect any of this." I laughed. "I know." She sighed. "I wish they'd stop treating you like an agent." Those words caught me off guard. She noticed it too. "You've noticed, Claire?" "I noticed years ago." I changed the subject. Neither of us wanted to argue about family. 2 weeks before the wedding, Mom called again. "I have one more favor." I almost laughed. "Of course you do." She ignored the joke. There are some last-minute expenses. How much? 8,000. I stared at my computer screen. Even with my salary, that wasn't a small amount. Still, I transferred it. Mom cried, called me an angel, said she didn't know what they'd do without me. For a moment, I actually believed her. The wedding weekend finally arrived. I booked a business class ticket, not because I wanted luxury, because after working 60-hour weeks, I desperately needed sleep before such an emotional weekend. I landed Friday afternoon, rented a car, bought Lily's wedding gift, a beautiful antique music box she'd admired years earlier, then drove toward the venue. It sat on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. White flowers lined the entrance. Soft music floated through the air. Guests laughed. Children ran across the lawn. It looked perfect. I smiled, thinking, maybe all those extra hours at work had been worth it. Maybe seeing Lily happy would make everything worthwhile. I picked up my suitcase, walked toward the entrance, and that's when my mother stepped directly into my path. She wasn't smiling anymore. She looked nervous. She glanced over both shoulders to make sure nobody was listening, then quietly said, "Claire, I need you to do something for me." "What?" She took another deep breath. "Nathan's family doesn't know about you." I frowned. "What does that mean?" "They think Lily is our only daughter." I laughed, waiting for the punchline. It never came. Mom looked me straight in the eyes. "Please, for this weekend, just tell people you're an old family friend." My heart stopped. I searched her face, hoping this was some terrible joke. It wasn't. The woman standing in front of me, my own mother, was asking me to erase myself, so the wedding photos would match the story she'd been telling for years. And in that moment, I realized the flight from Seattle wasn't the hardest journey I'd made. The hardest part was standing 5 feet away from the people I'd spent my entire life trying to earn. I stared at my mother, waiting for her to smile, waiting for her to say, "I'm kiddin'." She never did. Instead, she looked past me toward the parking lot. Guests were arriving every few minutes. She lowered her voice. "Please don't make a scene." A scene? I had just flown nearly 14 hours. Spent almost $25,000 helping pay for this wedding over the last year. And somehow, I was the one who might cause a scene. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Why?" Mom folded her arms. "It's complicated." "No, it isn't. Tell me." She sighed impatiently. "Nathan's parents are traditional." I frowned. "So, they ask a lot of questions." "I still don't understand." She looked around again before answering. "They think Lily has always been an only child." The words didn't make sense. "Why would they think that?" "Because..." She hesitated. "That's what we've told them." For a moment, everything around me disappeared. The music, the laughter, the sound of waves crashing against the cliffs. All I could hear was my own heartbeat. "You lied about me?" "It wasn't exactly a lie." I laughed bitterly. "You told people I don't exist." Mom rubbed her temples. "Claire, you moved away years ago. You hardly come home. It was easier." "Easier for who?" She didn't answer. Before I could say another word, Dad walked over. "Everything okay?" Mom forced a smile. "Just catching up." I looked directly at him. "Did you know?" His eyes dropped to the ground. That was answer enough. "Claire," Dad spoke quietly, "we'll explain later." "When?" "After the wedding." "So, I'm supposed to pretend this conversation never happened?" Mom grabbed my arm gently. "Please. Just one weekend. For Lily." I pulled my arm away. "Don't use Lily to justify this." Just then, the venue coordinator walked over. "Mrs. Bennett, the rehearsal dinner starts in 10 minutes. Mom smiled brightly. "We'll be right there." The second the coordinator walked away, her smile disappeared. "Please remember, you're Claire, our family friend from Seattle." Then she walked away as if nothing had happened, leaving me standing alone with my suitcase. I seriously considered getting back into my rental car, driving straight to the airport, and forgetting this family ever existed. But then my phone buzzed. A text from Lily. Where are you? I've been looking everywhere. Red heart. I couldn't leave. Not yet. Not because of my parents. Because of her. The rehearsal dinner was held inside a beautiful glass hall overlooking the ocean. White candles covered every table. A small jazz band played quietly in the corner. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. I spotted Lily almost immediately. The moment she saw me, she ran across the room and hugged me tightly. You made it. I wouldn't miss this. She stepped back and smiled. I've missed you. I've missed you too. Then she noticed my expression. What's wrong? Before I could answer, Mom suddenly appeared beside us. Lily, the photographer needs you. Lily frowned. Already? Yes. She looked back at me. We'll talk later. I forced a smile. Go. As she walked away, Mom leaned close enough for only me to hear. Don't. That was it. One word. A warning. I spent the next hour sitting quietly at one of the back tables. Nobody recognized me, which made sense. According to my parents, I wasn't supposed to exist. Several guests smiled politely, asked where I knew the family from. Every answer felt like swallowing broken glass. I've known them for years. Technically, it wasn't a lie. About halfway through dinner, an elegant woman approached my table. She extended her hand. I'm Margaret Collins, Nathan's mother. I smiled politely. Claire. So, how do you know the Bennetts? There it was. The question. I looked toward my parents across the room. Mom was watching us. Waiting. I forced myself to answer. We've known each other a long time. Margaret smiled warmly. That's lovely. Diane speaks very highly of old family friends. Old family friend. Hearing those words out loud hurt more than I expected. Margaret sat down. You must know Lily very well. I do. She's such a wonderful young woman. She is. She smiled. I always wished Nathan had a sister. I almost laughed. Instead, I quietly replied, so did I. She didn't understand what I meant. The evening continued. People toasted the happy couple, shared funny stories, laughed together. Every family member stood to speak. Except me. Nobody introduced me. Nobody thanked me. Nobody even acknowledged I had helped make the wedding possible. I wasn't family. At least, not publicly. Later that night, I found Lily standing alone on the terrace overlooking the ocean. She smiled when she saw me. There you are. I've been hiding. She laughed. From Mom? Something like that. She studied my face. Claire, what happened? I looked into her eyes, then quietly asked, did you know? Her smile faded instantly. Know what? That Mom and Dad told Nathan's family you're an only child. The color disappeared from her face. What? They introduced me as a family friend. She stared at me in complete shock. No. They wouldn't. They did. For several seconds, she couldn't speak. Finally, she whispered, I'm so sorry. You didn't know? She shook her head immediately. I swear. I thought everyone knew about you. I believed her. Unlike our parents, Lily had never lied to me. Tears filled her eyes. I'm talking to them. No. Yes. This isn't okay. I gently held her hand. Tomorrow is your wedding. I don't care. I do. She looked at me. I won't let them treat you like this. I smiled sadly. They already have. Just then, Nathan walked onto the terrace. There you are. He smiled at Lily before looking at me. You must be Claire. I nodded. It's nice to finally meet you. He looked confused. My mom said you've known Lily forever. I have. He laughed. Funny. Lily's always talked about her big sister. Silence. Complete silence. Nathan looked from me to Lily, then back again. His smile slowly disappeared. Wait. Big sister? Lily froze. My heart sank. Nathan frowned. What does he mean? He looked toward the ballroom where our parents were laughing with his family, then quietly asked the question that changed everything. Claire, are you actually Lily's sister? Neither of us answered. We didn't have to, because in that moment, Nathan realized someone had lied. He just didn't know how big that lie really was. Nathan looked at me, then at Lily, then back again. No one spoke. The silence felt heavier than anything that had been said all evening. Finally, Nathan asked again, "Claire, are you really Lily's sister?" Lily slowly nodded. "Yes." His eyebrows pulled together. "I don't understand. My parents, they told my family Lily was an only child." Nathan stared at her in complete disbelief. "What?" Before either of us could explain, my mother stepped onto the terrace. "There you are." She smiled until she noticed the expressions on our faces. Her smile disappeared instantly. "Nathan, what happened?" He turned toward her. "I have one question." Mom forced another smile. "Of course. Why did you tell my parents Lily doesn't have a sister?" For the first time in my entire life, I saw my mother speechless. She looked at me, then at Lily, then back at Nathan. It's complicated." Nathan folded his arms. "I'd like the simple version." Mom laughed nervously. "Oh, this is just a misunderstanding." "No," I interrupted. "It isn't." She shot me a warning look. The same look she'd given me outside the entrance. The one that meant, "Stay quiet." For once, I refused. "I'm her older sister. I've always been her older sister. I paid for most of this wedding. And yesterday, my own parents introduced me as a family friend." Nathan slowly turned toward my father. "Is that true?" Dad lowered his head. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Nathan took one slow step backward. "I need some air." Then he walked away. Without another word. The moment he disappeared, Mom exploded. "What have you done?" I almost laughed. "What have I done? You couldn't wait one weekend? You embarrassed us." I looked around the empty terrace. "No. You embarrassed yourselves." Lily stepped between us. "Mom, stop. You lied. You lied to Nathan. You lied to his family. And you lied to me." Mom looked stunned. "I was protecting you." "Protecting me from what?" "Our reputation." Lily frowned. "What reputation?" Mom sighed dramatically. "You wouldn't understand. I had heard enough." "No. I understand perfectly. You've spent years pretending I'm not part of this family." She crossed her arms. "Don't be dramatic." "Dramatic. I've spent over $20,000 helping pay for this wedding. I flew across the country. And the first thing you asked me to do was pretend I wasn't your daughter." My voice never rose. It didn't need to. Every word landed exactly where it needed to. Dad finally spoke. "Claire, maybe we should discuss this privately." I looked at him. "When? After another 10 years? He had no answer. Lily wiped tears from her face. "I'm done." Mom stared at her. "What?" "I'm done pretending everything's okay. It's my wedding. I deserve the truth." She turned toward me. "Come with me." We walked away together, leaving our parents standing alone on the terrace. Back inside the venue, guests laughed over dessert. Nobody knew the wedding had almost fallen apart. Nathan stood near one of the windows, his best man beside him. He looked exhausted. When he saw us, he excused himself and walked over. "Lily, can we talk?" She nodded, then looked at me. "Don't go anywhere." "I won't." I watched them disappear into another room for nearly 40 minutes. Meanwhile, I wandered through the gardens behind the venue, trying to make sense of everything. My phone buzzed. It was Aunt Rebecca, Dad's older sister. She rarely called. "Claire, I just heard." I smiled sadly. "The news travels fast. It always does in this family." She paused. "I should have spoken up years ago." "What do you mean?" "You weren't the first." I stopped walking. "What?" Rebecca sighed. "Your mother has always cared too much about appearances. When you left for Seattle, she started telling people she only had one daughter. She thought it sounded better." My chest tightened. "Better?" "You were independent. You lived far away. You built your own life. She worried people would think you left because something was wrong at home. So, she slowly stopped mentioning you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So, This wasn't about Nathan's family?
No.
It started years before that. Rebecca's voice became softer. I argued with your father. More than once. But he never stood up to her. That hurt almost as much as Mom's lies. Dad hadn't agreed. He'd simply stayed silent. Sometimes, silence causes just as much damage as words. About an hour later, Lily found me sitting near the ocean. She looked emotionally drained. How did it go? She sat beside me. Nathan knows everything. And he isn't angry with you. I figured. He's angry with my parents. She looked out at the water. He asked me one question. What was it? If they could hide their own daughter for years, what else are they hiding? Neither of us spoke. The question hung between us, because neither of us knew the answer. The next morning, wedding day, the venue buzzed with excitement. Hairstylists hurried between rooms. Florists adjusted centerpieces. Photographers captured every detail. To everyone else, it looked like the perfect wedding. Only a handful of people knew. The perfect family had already cracked. Around 10 o'clock, there was a knock on my hotel room door. It was Dad. He looked exhausted. Older than I remembered. Can I come in? I stepped aside. He remained standing. I owe you an apology. I waited. I should have stopped your mother years ago. Why didn't you? He stared at the floor. I thought keeping peace was protecting the family. He looked up. I realized now. I was protecting myself. That was the first completely honest thing I'd heard from him in years. I don't expect forgiveness. He continued. I just wanted you to hear that. I nodded slowly. Thank you. He smiled sadly, then walked away. Half an hour later, the ceremony was ready to begin. Guests filled the white chairs facing the ocean. Music started playing. Everyone stood. The wedding coordinator approached me. Miss Bennett. Yes. She smiled. The bride asked for you. I followed her toward the bridal suite. When I walked inside, Lily was already wearing her wedding dress. She looked beautiful, but she was crying. She walked over, took both my hands, and whispered something I never expected to hear. Today, I don't want you sitting with the guests. I want you walking beside me. My heart stopped. What? She smiled through her tears. I don't care what anyone thinks anymore. You're my sister. And today, the whole world is going to know it. For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. I simply stared at Lily. She squeezed my hands. I mean it. I want you beside me. I shook my head. Lily, this is your day. It shouldn't become about me. She smiled through her tears. It isn't about you. It's about telling the truth. I've spent my whole life looking up to you. You worked 2 jobs while studying. You helped Mom and Dad every time they needed money. You never missed my birthday. You were the one who taught me to ride a bike. You were there after my first heartbreak. She wiped another tear from her cheek. You've always acted like my sister. It's time everyone else knows you are. Before I could answer, the bridal suite door opened. The wedding coordinator stepped inside. We're ready. Lily nodded, then looked at me. So, what do you say? I smiled for the first time since arriving in Oregon. I'd be honored. She hugged me so tightly, I almost cried. 10 minutes later, the music began outside. Guests stood as Nathan took his place at the altar. The ocean breeze carried the soft sound of a violin quartet. Ironically, the song they were playing had been one I suggested months earlier. At the time, no one had thanked me. Now, it felt like the perfect soundtrack. The bridesmaids lined up. Then, instead of walking alone, Lily reached for my hand. The wedding coordinator looked confused. I thought she was sitting with the guests. Lily smiled confidently. She's walking with me. Across the lawn. My mother's face instantly lost its color. Dad looked equally stunned. Neither of them moved. There was nothing they could do. Hundreds of guests were already watching. As the doors opened, every head turned toward us. Whispers spread through the audience. Who's she? Is that another bridesmaid? I've never seen her before. I ignored every voice. My attention stayed on Lily. She smiled the entire walk. Her hand never left mine. When we reached the front, Nathan looked at me. then smiled warmly. He quietly whispered, "I'm glad you're here." I nodded. "So am I." The ceremony began. Everything went smoothly, until the officiant reached the traditional family acknowledgement. He smiled toward the audience. "Today, we celebrate not only the joining of two people, but two families." He looked toward my parents. "I'd also like to recognize those who helped make today possible." My mother smiled proudly. Then, Lily gently raised her hand. "May I say something?" The officiant looked surprised. "Of course." Lily stepped toward the microphone. The guest smiled, assuming she wanted to thank everyone. Instead, she looked directly at me. "There is one person who deserves to be standing beside me today." She reached for my hand again. "My big sister, Claire." A quiet murmur moved through the audience. Several guests turned toward my parents, confused. Lily continued, "Some of you are probably surprised, because many of you were told I'm an only child." She paused. "That isn't true." The whispers grew louder. Nathan gently squeezed her shoulder, encouraging her to continue. "My sister has spent years helping our family. When Dad's business struggled, she paid the bills. When I started college, she bought my laptop. When this wedding became too expensive, she quietly paid for things nobody else even knows about." I immediately felt tears building. I never wanted recognition, but hearing Lily say those words meant everything. She looked toward our parents. "I don't understand why you hid her. I probably never will. But today, I refuse to pretend she isn't part of my life." The audience became completely silent. No phones, no whispers, just silence. Nathan stepped beside her. "I'd like to say something too." He turned toward everyone. "When I asked Diane and Frank about Claire yesterday, I learned more in 10 minutes than I'd learned in 2 years." He looked at me. "I'm sorry. You deserved better." Then he surprised everyone. He walked toward me, extended his hand, and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Welcome to the family." The guests immediately applauded. Not politely, genuinely. Some people even stood. Across the front row, my mother looked frozen. She stared at the ground, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Dad slowly wiped tears from his face. The ceremony continued. Lily and Nathan exchanged vows, placed rings on each other's fingers, promised to build a life based on honesty. Those words carried far more meaning after everything that had happened. When the officiant finally announced, "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the applause echoed across the ocean. For a brief moment, everything felt peaceful again. The reception began an hour later. Guests laughed, danced, enjoyed dinner. But everywhere I walked, people introduced themselves. Not because they were curious anymore, because they wanted to know me. One elderly woman smiled warmly. "I've known your mother for 12 years. I had no idea she had another daughter." Another guest quietly whispered, "You handled today with incredible grace." I simply smiled. There was nothing else to say. Late that evening, Nathan's mother, Margaret, found me standing near the garden. "I owe you an apology." "You don't." "Ido." I believed what I was told. She looked disappointed in herself. "I should have asked more questions." "You couldn't have known." She nodded slowly, then surprised me. "Would you join us for breakfast tomorrow?" "Our family breakfast." I smiled. "I'd like that." Those simple words meant more than she realized. For the first time that weekend, someone invited me because they wanted me there, not because they needed something. As the reception continued, my mother approached me for the first time since the ceremony. Her makeup had begun to smudge. She looked exhausted. "We need to talk." I looked at her calmly. "Not tonight." Her voice trembled. "Please." I gently shook my head. "Tonight belongs to Lily. If you truly want to talk, we can do it tomorrow." She nodded once, then quietly walked away. For the first time in my life, she wasn't the one ending the conversation. I was. And somehow, that simple boundary felt stronger than any argument could have been. As I watched Lily and Nathan share their first dance, I finally realized something. For years, I had spent my life trying to earn a place in my own family. But respect isn't something you beg for. It's something you refuse to live without. I had no idea that the hardest conversation of my life was waiting for me the very next morning. And it wouldn't end with an apology. It would end with an envelope. That changed everything. The morning after the wedding, the venue looked completely different. The fairy lights had been taken down. Most of the flowers had already been packed away. Workers quietly folded chairs and loaded tables into trucks. It was strange how quickly something beautiful could disappear. I stood on the balcony outside my hotel room, watching the waves crash against the cliffs. For the first time in months, I felt calm, not because everything had been fixed, but because I had finally stopped pretending everything was fine. My phone buzzed. A text from Dad. "Can we meet before you leave?" I stared at the message for several seconds. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Another part knew running away wouldn't change anything. I replied with one word. "Okay." An hour later, I walked into a small private dining room beside the hotel restaurant. Dad was already there. Mom sat beside him. Neither of them looked like they'd slept. There were no smiles.
No polite greetings.
Just silence. Dad stood as I entered. "Thanks for coming." I sat across from them. "You said you wanted to talk." Mom nodded. "We do." For almost a minute, nobody spoke. Finally, Dad pushed a large white envelope across the table. "We've gone through the wedding expenses." I looked down at it. "What is this?" Mom answered. "The final balance." I frowned. "I don't understand. You've always helped the family, so we thought you'd want to finish helping." Something inside me tightened. I slowly opened the envelope. Inside were several invoices. The venue, the caterer, the florist, the live band, decorations, photography. At the bottom, a handwritten total. $41,287.63. For a second, I honestly thought it was a joke. Then I looked at my parents. Neither of them was smiling. They were serious. I looked up. "You expect me to pay this?" Mom folded her hands. "Not all at once." As if that somehow made it reasonable. I let out a quiet laugh. Not because it was funny, because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Dad spoke carefully. "The wedding cost more than we expected. I notice you have the best job in the family. There it is." He frowned.
What?
"The real reason you wanted me here." Mom leaned forward. "Claire, this isn't fair." I looked directly into her eyes.
No.
It isn't. For years, I had kept a spreadsheet. Every transfer, every emergency payment, every bill I had covered. I never planned to use it. I simply liked keeping records. A habit from working in software. I reached into my bag, pulled out my tablet, opened one folder, then turned the screen toward them. "Do you recognize these?" Dad adjusted his glasses. Mom looked confused. The spreadsheet filled the screen. Roof repairs, $6,800. Repair shop equipment, $11,300. Hospital bills, $9,600.
Wedding venue deposit, $7,500.
Catering payment, $4,200. Photography deposit, $3,400. Emergency florist payment, $2,100. Page after page. Year after year. Every payment. Every date. Every bank confirmation. I quietly asked, "Would you like the total?" Neither of them answered. I tapped one cell. At the bottom, the final amount appeared. $286,914.52. Mom stared at the number. Dad slowly removed his glasses. His hands shook. "For 12 years. I said calmly, "I've helped this family. I never asked for repayment. I never asked for recognition. I never even asked for a thank you." I looked at the envelope between us. "And after everything, you sent me a bill." Mom's voice became defensive. "We sacrificed for you when you were growing up." I nodded. "You did. And I appreciated it. But parents don't keep receipts for raising their children." The room fell silent. Dad quietly whispered, "I didn't know it was this much." I believed him. Mom had always handled the finances. He probably never knew the real numbers. I continued. I've never regretted helping. I regret believing it meant I was loved. Mom looked horrified. How can you say that? Because yesterday, you asked me to pretend I wasn't your daughter. You didn't forget me. You erased me. There was nothing left to argue. The truth had already been spoken. Mom reached across the table. I made mistakes. I know. I was embarrassed. Of what? She couldn't answer. Finally, she whispered, I thought people would judge us. For having a daughter who left? She nodded slowly. I kept telling myself, it was easier. Easier than what? Easier than admitting. I pushed you away. Those words caught me completely off guard. It was the first truly honest thing I'd ever heard from her. Tears rolled down her face. You became so independent. You didn't need us. So I convinced myself. You didn't want us. I quietly replied. I stopped asking because every conversation ended with money. She lowered her head. She knew I was right. Dad slowly pushed the envelope back toward himself. I'm sorry. I never should have agreed to this. You shouldn't have. Without saying another word, he tore the invoices into small pieces, one by one, until the entire bill lay scattered across the table. Mom watched silently. She didn't stop him. I can't change the past, Dad said. But I won't let this continue. He reached into his jacket,
Pulled out a small key.
This belongs to your grandmother's safety deposit box. I looked confused. I thought it was empty. So did I. It isn't. He slid the key across the table. She left instructions. They weren't opened until last month. And Dad smiled sadly. She left something for you. My heart skipped. My grandmother? He nodded. She wrote, give this to Claire when she's finally ready to stop carrying everyone else's burdens. Tears filled my eyes instantly. Grandma Eleanor had passed away 4 years earlier. She always understood me better than anyone, even when she said very little. Dad continued. There's a letter. And something else. What? I haven't opened it. It belongs to you. Before I could respond, someone knocked on the dining room door. It was Lily. She looked worried. Am I interrupting? Dad shook his head.
No.
She looked around the room, at the torn pieces of paper, at my tear-filled eyes. What happened? I smiled softly. It's over. She frowned. What is? The pretending. Lily walked over and hugged me tightly. I was afraid I'd lose you. You won't. She smiled. Promise. I promise. As we left the hotel together, the envelope containing the bill stayed behind on the table.
Destroyed.
Forgotten. Exactly where it belonged. But the small silver key. I slipped carefully into my pocket, because somehow, I knew my grandmother had left me more than an inheritance. She had left me one final lesson, and I had a feeling it was about to change everything I thought I knew about my family. The silver key stayed in my coat pocket the entire flight back to Seattle. I touched it several times during the trip, not because I was worried I'd lose it, because every time I felt its shape, I thought about Grandma Eleanor. She had always been different. She never judged. She never compared Lily and me. She never asked how much money I earned. Whenever I visited, she'd simply pour tea,
Smile.
and ask, so, are you happy? Back then, I never understood why that was always her first question.
Now.
I finally did. 3 days after returning home, I took the morning off work. The safety deposit box was inside the same small community bank my grandparents had used for decades. The building hadn't changed. Same brick walls. Same old clock. Even the same wooden counter. The bank manager greeted me warmly. You must be Claire. I smiled. I am. We've been expecting you. He disappeared into the vault, then returned carrying a small metal box. He placed it carefully on the table. This is yours. My hands shook as I unlocked it. Inside, there wasn't any jewelry. No stacks of cash. Just 3 things. A handwritten letter, a small velvet pouch, and a faded photograph. I picked up the photo first. It showed me about 8 years old, standing beside Grandma in her garden. I was holding a sunflower almost as tall as I was. Written on the back were 5 simple words. Never forget who you are. I smiled through tears. Next, I opened the velvet pouch. Inside was Grandma's wedding ring. Simple, elegant, nothing flashy, just plain gold. The same ring she'd worn for more than 50 years. A small note rested beneath it. Real value is measured by love, not price. I closed my eyes. It sounded exactly like something she would say. Finally, I unfolded the letter. Her handwriting filled 4 pages. The first line immediately made me cry. My dearest Claire, if you're reading this, it means you've finally stopped carrying burdens that never belonged to you. I took a deep breath and continued. I've watched you give pieces of yourself away since you were a little girl. You believed love had to be earned. It never does. Another tear rolled down my cheek. She continued. People who truly love you don't measure your worth by what you provide. They treasure your presence long before your generosity. Then came something I never expected. I know your mother loves you. She simply never learned how to show it without fear. Fear makes people hold too tightly to appearances. Don't become like that. I stopped reading for a moment. For years, I'd convinced myself my mother didn't love me.
Maybe she did.
Maybe she simply loved poorly. Understanding that didn't excuse what she'd done, but it helped explain it. Sometimes, people pass their own fears from one generation to the next without even realizing it. The final page held one last surprise. I've left you one final gift. Not because you need money, but because I want you to build something that belongs only to you. Attached to the letter was documentation for a small investment account. Grandma had quietly invested a little money every year since I was born. The account had grown steadily for decades. The balance wasn't millions, but it was enough. Enough for a down payment on a home. Enough to start the business I'd dreamed about for years. Enough to remind me that someone had believed in my future long before I did. That evening, I sat alone in my apartment. The letter beside me, Grandma's ring in my hand. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. I was thinking about what I could build. A week later,
My phone rang.
it was Mom. I let it ring twice before answering. Hello. There was a long silence.
Then,
I wasn't sure you'd pick up. I almost didn't. I understand. Her voice sounded different. Quieter. Less certain. I've started seeing a counselor. I didn't expect that. What? I need help. I've spent too much of my life worrying about what other people think. I hurt the people who mattered most. She paused. I'm trying to change. I believed she meant it. Whether she'd succeed, only time would tell. A few days later, Dad called. I sold the second truck. You did. We didn't need it. He laughed softly. And your mother and I finally learned how to make a budget. I couldn't help smiling. Took you long enough. It certainly did. Lily visited Seattle a month later. She and Nathan spent the weekend with me. We laughed, cooked dinner together, walked along the waterfront. For the first time, our relationship wasn't centered around family problems. It simply felt like 2 sisters spending time together. Exactly the way it should have always been. 6 months passed. Using Grandma's investment, I finally did something I dreamed about for years. I left my corporate job. Not because I hated it, because I wanted something different. I opened a small consulting business helping nonprofit organizations improve their technology systems. The work paid less, but every morning, I woke up excited. Success felt completely different when it belonged to me. One afternoon, a package arrived. No return address. Inside was a framed wedding photograph. The picture showed Lily, Nathan, and me standing together after the ceremony. Across the bottom, someone had written, the sister who should have been in every family photo. There was no signature. I didn't need one. I knew it was Lily. The frame found a permanent place in my living room, not because it reminded me of the pain, because it reminded me of the truth. Nearly a year after the wedding, the entire family gathered again, this time for Grandma Eleanor's memorial garden dedication. No one introduced me as a family friend. No one avoided saying my name. When visitors asked who I was, Mom smiled proudly. "This is my oldest daughter." The words were simple, but they carried years of regret and genuine change. After the ceremony, she hugged me, not because she needed money, not because someone was watching,
Just because she wanted to.
sometimes. Healing doesn't happen in one dramatic moment. It happens quietly, one honest conversation at a time. As I drove home that evening, I thought about everything that had happened. The wedding, the lies, the envelope, the letter,
The key.
and I realized something. The greatest gift Grandma left me wasn't the investment. It wasn't the ring. It wasn't even the letter. It was permission. Permission to stop proving my worth. Permission to stop buying love. Permission to choose peace over approval. And that changed my life forever. Moral of the story: family isn't defined by shared blood or the amount of money you sacrifice. It's defined by honesty, respect, and the willingness to stand beside each other without conditions. Never confuse being needed with being loved. People who truly care about you won't measure your value by what you can give them. They'll value your presence, your character, and your heart. The moment you stop chasing approval from those who refuse to appreciate you is the moment you begin building a life where you finally appreciate yourself. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money. It's the courage to know your own worth